I'm here to remind you.
So we're at the Parsha of Bamidbar, in the desert. It begins in our Eitz Chaim Chumash on 769, and it's the very, very beginning of the book of Numbers. So if you can find the book of Numbers, that's where it is. Chapter 1, starting with verse 1. This is the fourth book of the Torah, and it's the book that it introduces itself as taking place in the wilderness, in the desert, and spoiler alert, in a couple of weeks we'll find out that we're going to get stuck in the desert for a whole generation. But at this point, we are a little more than a year after getting out of Egypt, so it's still pretty fresh. The first verse of the book of Bamidbar says, on the first day of the second month in the second year following the Exodus. So we left in the first month of the year, Nisan. We left in the middle of that month, right? That's when Passover is, at the new moon of the first month of the Hebrew year, Nisan, and this is the second month. So this is exactly 2 weeks and 1 year after we left Egypt. Okay, that's when this book opens up, and the Torah reading is about getting ready to leave Mount Sinai. When did we get to Mount Sinai? When did we arrive at Mount Sinai? So it's a little bit of a trick question, because we are about to celebrate Shavuot, right? We're looking forward to that Sunday night. And Shavuot is how many days after we left Egypt?
50.
50 days after we left Egypt. So we got the Torah at Mount Sinai 50 days after we left Egypt, but we actually were at Mount Sinai for a few days before that. So we get to Mount Sinai at the beginning of the month. Okay, the beginning of Sivan, which is the third month. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. Okay, so we get to Mount Sinai at the beginning of Sivan, and now we are 11 months later. Okay, we're at the following Iyar. So just a little bit less than a year since we got to Mount Sinai, and slightly, again, a little less than a year since we got the Torah. And we've been sitting there at Mount Sinai, so for approximately a year, right? For almost a year that we've been living at Mount Sinai. And now God says, guess what? It's time to pull up stakes, right? Literally, the tent stakes have to be pulled up. The tents have to be folded up. Everybody's got to pack their bags, and it's time to move toward the promised land. This is a pretty, actually, exciting moment. Unfortunately, the Torah reading itself is one of the most boring Torah readings you can imagine. But that's part of this kind of ironic interplay. The text is very, very, very unexciting, because it's just lists of numbers and organizing details. But what the organizational process is all about is actually one of the most exciting changes in our very, very short history. And when you think about it, we're moving away from this unbelievable place. This is a place where we met God. This is a place where we had the most glorious experiences of our nation, very short-lived, history, of course, and also the most terrible experiences of our nation, the golden calf. And then we picked ourselves up and we dusted ourselves off. And as a community, we all banded together and we created a mishkan, a tabernacle, a tent of meeting to be with God, And it's all happened within these last 11 months. Pretty amazing. And we're going to now leave. We're going to leave that spot. And we're supposed to actually be going to a place that none of these Israelites have ever seen, right? They've only known Egypt and they've known Mount Sinai. And now they're going to go, quote unquote, home. But home is a place that they never actually ever encountered. They just heard about it. So the Torah reading is taking a census of all of the eligible males for military service. So everybody's getting ready to move. Everybody's doing what they need to do in terms of the packing and stuff. But we also, says God, we need to know who's going to be ready to be a soldier, because entering into the promised land is going to be very soon. And when we enter the promised land, we're going to fight. We're going to encounter enemies, and it's not going to be easy. So, reading these words under the cloud of what's happening at this very moment is a little, I don't know what, a little creepy, maybe a little daunting. But this is the first concern that we have as in terms of the text is let's make sure how many troops we have. How many soldiers are there in this tribe? How many soldiers are there in that tribe? For the 12 tribes of Israel. That's the beginning of our Torah reading. And it just goes through the numbers. It goes through setting up the census and then who's in charge. So it's this whole administrative list and then just a whole administrative report of numbers and more numbers and more numbers. So that's why it's very uninspiring. It's very uninteresting. If you look at, if you have the Eitz Chaim Chumash, so for instance, once the census gets going, we're beginning on 769. So here's 769, right? Here's 769. Here's the verse. Here's our translation. Commentary. When we get to the next page, we get to the next page, there's the text in Hebrew, there's the translation, commentary. So finally we start getting into the counting. Here's the text. This is all text all the way down. And there's a tiny, because of like 4 lines of commentary. And then when you get to the next page, page 772, here's page 772. Here's the text, here's the translation. And we go all the way to the bottom of the page, 0 commentary. What are we going to say? Okay, so this was 35,000 and the next tribe was 36,000. There's nothing to say. So there's very little commentary for this whole first Torah portion. We get into the rest of the Torah portion, again, 775. I don't have to, believe me, trust me. Carolyn, I know there's a bunch of people you don't trust. Trust me about this. There's very little commentary here. You can check it out. You can check it out yourself. Yeah, Jennifer.
There's no mystical meaning to the numbers or anything that people have pried from this?
Not much, although, I mean, it's an interesting point that you raised. Very careful readers, Bible scholars, actually have spent time comparing numbers, right? Number crunchers. There are these wonky people that this is really the kind of stuff that they like to do. So we have a number of places in the Torah where we get these kinds of numbers, where the tribes are counted and where, we have the number for this tribe and the number for this tribe. So it becomes of interest for me to read when somebody else does all the grunt work, and then comes back and says, oh, look, here there's a little interesting feature when you compare this counting. This is an early counting, right? Later on, we're going to get a counting again. When are we going to get a counting? In Deuteronomy, we're going to get another counting when we really, really are poised to enter the land, right? Because we got that little detour problem that we all know about in the middle. So, and then we've got two countings, and then we can put them side by side and we can see what actually has been going on. Some of you may know that we just actually did something similar for the American Jewish community. There's the Pew survey that just came out. Again, a lot of its meaning has to do with making a comparison. One survey, one census by itself only gives you so much information. But if you have a comparative census, oh, look, here's what the numbers look like now, and 10 years ago, this is what the numbers look like. Then things are going up, things are going down. Trends begin to start emerging. So the truth of the matter is that once we get into Deuteronomy to the other census, or it's at the end of Numbers, but right before Deuteronomy, then we actually have a little bit more material to play with. So we're going to wait for that for later. How's that? So that's a big part of the Torah reading. Then we have the issue of organization. Another one of these like super dramatic topics that people just get all, the hairs at the back of their neck stand up. Organizing. So I was being sarcastic. So it basically takes each tribe and tells them, you stand there, you stand over here, you stand over there, right? It's like if you look at, I was with the preschool this morning. If you look, for instance, in marching and in lining everybody up, making sure everybody's in the right place, it's super boring, it's super tedious, but it's also very important because otherwise it'll be chaos. So we have the drawing out of the way that the encampment of Israel needed to be planned out. It's a planned community. It's very much on like a Manhattan, vertical and horizontal lines, no squiggly things, no circle-y things, no irregular kinds of borders. It's a rectangle. We end up creating a rectangle and getting everybody into the box. Everybody's someplace in the box. It's got four sides, like what a rectangle is, and there are 12 tribes. So there are 3 tribes on one side and 3 tribes on the other side and 3 tribes on that side and 3 tribes on the other side. What's in the middle?
The Mishkan.
The Mishkan, right? So the center of the planned community is the sanctuary, right? The temple, the tabernacle. It's a temporary temple. That's the heart geographically and in every way. That's the way the community is designed. Everybody, to be a little everybody lives within walking distance of the shul, right? Everybody lives right there on one side or the other of the tabernacle, and everybody is assigned their place to live, right? So it's a little bit of a control thing going on here, and they have to march that way. When they're encamped, they have to put down their tents in those specific places. When they pick up their stuff and get ready to march, then the Torah tells you this side marches first. Then the next side of the next 3 tribes, they follow next. Here's the leader of the 3 tribes. They're the leaders of that flank. And everybody lines up, and first, and the rectangle then becomes a straight line with the tabernacle in the middle of the caravan. Who takes care of the tabernacle?
Levites.
The Levites. So that's the other main topic of the discussion. Let's count up the Levites. So another fun section, of all the different, this family had, 10,000 and this family had 8,000 and this family had whatever. So that becomes the preoccupation again of all of this, getting everything ready and giving out jobs. Who's going to carry the planks from the wall of the Mishkan when we dismantle it? Who's going to carry the ark? Who's going to carry the menorah? Who's going to carry the dolphin skins? Who's going to carry? So these are all have to be assigned. So it's super crucial, super non-dramatic. And then there's this other little interesting little piece, which is that there's an official switcheroo that takes place where God says these Levites who are supposed to take care of everything here, they are replacing a different class of people who were my original plan was that this other group was supposed to take care of everything. But like Gerald would say, I don't trust them anymore. I'm not dealing with them anymore. So now I trust the Levites. I'm giving it to the Levites instead. Who's the group that was displaced by the Levites? Does anybody remember? The firstborn, the Bechor. So the original plan, says God, was that it wasn't going to be one tribe that was going to be selected out from the other tribes, and that one tribe, the Levites, was going to be the specialized religious custodian, class. Originally, everybody in the entire people was going to participate in this by giving to God their first fruits. Just like you give first fruits on Shavuot. Here's the first grapes that I'm harvesting. Here's the first olives that I harvest. So too, my first child, I give to God. So that first child, the Bechor, was meant to be, like there's this whole tradition that in the Italian families and Catholic families in the old days, they would always be one kid has to be a priest, right? So this was very much like that. This was this idea that the original plan was that every family, pretty much, right? If they had a firstborn son, that firstborn son would be dedicated to God's service. And that's how we would actually take care of all of our religious needs. But instead, this much more dispersed, more, if you want to call it even inclusive or democratic plan is changed. Yeah.
So the Levites are who exactly? I lost that.
Levites are one tribe out of the 12.
Oh, they're a tribe. They're an entire tribe.
They're an entire tribe.
Okay.
Because they come from Levi. Levi is one of the 12 sons of Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
So now the interesting thing is we always talk about 12 tribes, right? But depending on how you count them, the 12 tribes change. If you're following the 12 tribes based on the 12 sons of Jacob, then the Levites are one of those 12 tribes. But once we take the Levites out and give them a special status all for themselves, then we still want to keep 12 tribes. So how do we compensate?
Why?
Because what do you because that number is like this very sacred number.
Okay.
It's a tradition of the 12 tribes, and it comes back to that Jacob story where Jacob on his deathbed almost, he takes, Geraldine, what were you going to say?
Recognize Ephraim and Manasseh.
Right, Ephraim and Manasseh are the two sons of Joseph. So the 12 sons of Jacob are Reuven, Shimon, Levi. Joseph is the next to last, and then Benjamin, right? So that's 12 sons. So Joseph could be a tribe. But then Jacob says, you know what? since he's angry actually at Levi, he says, I'm making Ephraim and Manasseh, instead of they're not my sons, they're my grandsons, but I'm elevating them up and they become 2 tribes instead of Joseph as 1 tribe. So once we take Levi and put him off on the side, we still have 12 tribes to divide the land up for and to talk about 12 tribes and so on. But so we always talk about 12 tribes. The Levites have this special status. They're sort of in, but out at the same time. Sandra, yeah.
Is this where that notion of the lost tribe, where there are actually 13 tribes?
No,
It's totally
the
something
lost
else?
tribes concept comes about when we have a split between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and the northern kingdom gets exiled 150 years before the southern kingdom,
Okay.
and they disappear. So mostly what we call the Jewish people today is mostly from the tribe of Judah. That's why we're called Jews.
Oh,
And that's Judah. Benjamin got swallowed up into Judah. We have some Levites. Levites include priests, Kohanim, right? Whoever was living in that southern area
mhm.
had a better chance of surviving as a Jew. And the whole northern kingdom was dispersed, assimilated, who knows what happened to them. And the legend, in order to keep the integrity of the Jewish people and to hope for a restoration of the entire people, so the legend of the 10 lost tribes became a very powerful legend. And that was, no, they're lost. We don't know where they are, but guess what? When the Messiah comes, they're going to come. They're over this in this region that we haven't been able to get to, and so on. We talked a little bit about it in our story time in Kosher Salt. We read a couple of stories having to do with that.
Oh,
So that comes much later. That comes much later. So yeah, Jen.
Can I go backwards a little bit to the beginning of this Torah
Try it.
section? Just ask a
Let's try
question.
it and see what happens.
Okay.
You have those-
Where does the
you have those
notion? I
beeping-
couldn't.
You have those beeping warning lights?
Okay, we'll see. Yeah. I couldn't find it in the reading, but I have like in my head that we count people by shekels or half shekels or something. We don't count the actual person, and for that reason, we don't like number people or give people
Right.
just
So
numbers. And
that's a different counting time. That was when we were actually getting ready to make the Mishkan.
okay,
That's back in Exodus.
I missed it. Oh no.
You didn't miss it. It's just, it'll be there whenever you go back for it. It'll be there. So that's where we are told that in order to count people, we should do it by, and that's an annual thing to for the upkeep of the tabernacle.
Is it implied that we did it here also?
That's implied. It's not.
But not stated.
It doesn't go into that kind of detail. Yeah.
Thanks.
Carolyn.
For those of you who are visual, which is what I am, not in the Eitz Chaim, but in the Chumash that we used before, the
Hertz Chumash.
the Hertz Chumash, I don't have one, so I can't tell you what page, but on the bottom of the page on the right-hand side, there's a picture of with the names of each of the tribes around the Mishkan.
Right.
Here it is.
Right. So I'm wondering whether they have something comparable in the Eitz Chaim at the back. Let me
I
just
don't
take
know, but I remember
a look.
that visually, which tribe was where in the
Right.
configuration.
Well, it definitely tells you no. So they give you the Mishkan, but they don't give you that. So if you look, for instance, at chapter 2, 774.
Can you see it?
There it is. Look,
Yes, there
see?
it is.
There it is. Thank you. There it is. So if you look at 774, chapter 2 of Numbers, starting from the beginning, we could read that real quick. Geraldine, you got it?
No, I don't. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay, somebody else. Who's got the text in front of them? Chapter 2 of Numbers. Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Okay, chapter 2, Numbers. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, the Israelites shall camp each with his standard under the banners of their ancestral house. They shall camp around the tent of meetings at a distance. Camped at the front or the east side, the standard of the division of Judah, troop by troop. Chieftain of the Judites, Nachshon, son of Aminadav, his troop enrolled 74,600. Coming next to him, the troop of Issachar, chieftain of the Issacharites, Nathaniel, son of Zual, his troop enrolled at 54,400. The tribe of Zvulun, chieftain of the Zvulunites, Eliab, son of Chelon, his troop enrolled 57,400. The total enrolled in the division of Judah, 186,400 for all the troops.
Okay,
These
thank
shall
you.
march
Wait,
first.
that's good. I don't want people to get too excited. So let's take it in small bites. So here what we have, this is laying it out. This is Vahachonim Kedma, those who camp on the eastern side, right? So the eastern side has 3 tribes. The first lead tribe is Judah. No surprise, right? Judah was the main son of Jacob. He took the lead in the whole Joseph story, remember? So this is, historically speaking, Judah was always one of the most prominent tribes. So here he is the one leading off, and he has 2 other tribes on his side, Zevulun and Yisachar, right? Or Yisachar and Zvulun, however you want to say it. Okay, so that's the 3 tribes on the east. Then if we go down to the next set of tribes, right? Look at verse 10, please.
On the south, the standard of the division of Reuven, troop by troop.
Okay, and then we have the name of the leader of that tribe. And then in verse 12, we have the next tribe that goes with Reuven, Shimon. And then in verse 14,
and the tribe of Gad.
Right. So Reuven, who is the Bechor, right? Reuven, who is supposedly the firstborn and should be the leader, he gets second billing to Judah, right? But
Why
he
is
does
that?
well, you have to go back to Genesis. So he messes up a little bit, right? And he loses his pride of place, and Judah supplants him. Joseph supplants him a little bit, and Judah supplants him. So those are things. Try to remember that the next time we do circle around and get back to Genesis.
It's not it's Genesis?
Yeah, when we talk
Oh,
about
Genesis, towards the end. Yes, I got it.
when we talk about Jacob's sons,
Okay.
right, and Joseph and his brothers. That would be actually a good title for a book.
Let me, I want to tell you, and I'm not going to tell you now, but amazing reading this.
Right, Audrey is reading Thomas Mann's Joseph and his brothers, all 1,000 pages of it.
I just found it on my bookcase. I don't know where I got it from my grandfather, my father. It was one of these things, and I've made it a commitment that I'm reading that this year.
Right.
You
So
should. It's
Or
really,
you will do book club afterwards.
it's very
right.
entertaining. It really
whole-
is.
you have the complete the volume,
Three volumes.
3 volumes, because it came out originally in 3 separate volumes.
And I gotta like wear rubber gloves. It's like 1954, and it's gonna fall apart on me. But I'm excited to attack
Right.
it.
Yes, it's an amazing piece of work. So in that story, Joseph and his brothers, we get all of this jockeying and who ends up, getting to be a leader and who's supposed to be a leader and loses it. So Reuven loses that. And then, so that's on the south. Okay. So think about this. We're talking about, from my perspective, east and then south, right? So now we're going to go over here and then over here. Right. So then if we go back to the text, if you go, look at 17 just for a second.
Then midway between the divisions, the tent of meeting, the division of the Levites, each Levite shall move.
Okay.
As they camp, so they shall march, each in position by their standards.
Right. And then we get now the next one.
On the west,
this
the
is
standard
south.
of Ephraim.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Right, we did south of many,
Right,
right.
we did
So now we
east,
do, right,
west.
this is correct. This is what I said. So now we're up to west. So
The division of
Ephraim,
Ephraim.
okay. And then 20
Next to it, Menashe, chieftain of the Manassites, and
and
next to him,
22.
the tribe of Benjamin.
Okay, so that's another trio, right? Ephraim, Menashe, and Benjamin. And
Oh.
again, what do we have with Ephraim and Menashe? Ephraim is the younger brother, and he supplants the older brother, right? So there's a little bit actually throughout this whole Torah reading of the uprooting of the privileged position of the firstborn, right? We see it in a number of ways, right? And then finally, 25.
On the north, the standard of the division of Dan,
And then we have 27
Asher,
and then 29,
Naphtali.
right? So that takes care of everybody. Okay, so that's the encampment, and that's the way that they're also going along and marching. Right? Yes. Okay. And marching along as well. So I want to just we're not doing a lot of reading of text, but I want us to think a little bit, again, acknowledging that this is pretty dry stuff. That's why it's called in the desert. But let's think for a second about what this supposes changed, right? This lays out a very, very specific kind of order. This order is a new thing, the way it's presented in the Torah, right? So it's right when they're getting ready to move. So I would then infer from this that before this Torah portion establishes this whole thing, it didn't exist before. So how do we picture what happened? Where was everybody before this?
You mean, where were they in relation to the Mishkan?
Where were they in relation to the Mishkan and in relation to each other?
Or just like wandering around, probably?
Well, they're camped, like I'm saying, they're living there already a year, more or less, right? How have they been living? When they got a letter, how did the postal worker, how did the postal worker know where to find them?
Oh.
I mean, I'm kind of imagining them all being in one sort of an organic group that kind of finds itself, like anything else.
Right? I think that's that's the direction I would go in imagining. Yes, Geraldine.
I have the book now. Chapter 2 at the beginning says, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, the Israelites shall camp each with his standard under the banners of their ancestral house. So there was a flag for each one, and they were around that.
So that's where so what I'm saying is this apparently is a new system that's being instituted. So it's like, let's, like when, if anybody went to color war, if anybody went to summer camp,
Right.
so we would have, at the, we'd have to start making our flags, we'd have to make our banners, we'd have to make our song, we'd have to make, this is part of this whole push, but it's not there before that. So, what's saying, it was much more chaotic. Yeah, Jen.
And it sounds like this is a big military push, though. So somebody realized, like, yeah, we actually have to be organized and ready to move and know who's going where, and we have to have standards so you know where you are in a battle and etc. So it sounds like it's all like based on reality that we might be attacked.
Right. Well, not just might be attacked, we might attack.
And we might attack, yeah.
And we might attack that. So that's the grim reality that's facing everybody looking forward into the future. So what I want to say is I just want to grasp a little bit more of what was before that. What was before that was this kind of like, the word organic is a great word, a kind of a natural agglomeration of people. People ended up pitching their tents, probably close to their family members. So there's a certain natural way of organizing, unless you really want to be as far away from your mother-in-law as possible. So then you do put your tent someplace else. Who was my neighbor in Egypt? Who did I become best friends with? So the ways that people would find how to, put down their address, their homes, where they would choose to live. There was no indication before this that they needed to listen to any rules. There were no rules. Everybody was able to just find their place or not, right? And some people probably were better at it. And some people ended up having to sort of like just make do. When you think about shanty towns, when you think about, these kinds of like overnight kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? When people live someplace, squatters, right? There's no, it's not like that, that they're told you have to, you have to have a 40 by 100 lot, and you have to, hook up to the sewer line and so on and so forth. It's really all catch as catch can. Everything before this was completely just naturally unfolding. And it was whatever people found their place, to be, that's where they were. That's where they were. And supposedly, what was at the middle of the camp?
The tabernacle.
No.
Oh, back then?
Yeah. The mountain. Right?
Yeah.
So, because remember that they're all circled around the mountain before they get the Torah, on Shavuot. So, I mean, was it a complete circle? Was it, no, but the point is they're all dispersed around this big looming, natural promontory thing, right? And then they're just like scattered around. So this is a kind of a change, obviously, in terms of social organization and in terms of a sense of mission. This is with this very imminent challenge facing them. So what do you think is going on in people's minds? What kinds of ways would people react to this? I'm a Zebulonite, right? And Alan is a Judahite, and we happen to be best friends. Wait a second, I wanted to get it away, right? I wanted to push people away. Wrong, so that's no good. I'm a Shimonite, right? And Alan is a Judahite, right? We're gonna now have to say goodbye to each other, and we will be on completely different quadrants of the community, right? This is like urban renewal or something. Our whole neighborhood is going to be destroyed, and we're going to be all relocated to different spots, and starting again. So does anybody want to chime in with what kinds of things could be going on? Has anybody have in their own family history or things that they've read? I mean, because this is, like I'm saying, these kinds of dislocations have happened. So what happens to people when they do that?
I'd be afraid, only because it looks like we're preparing for war. So that would be my, I'd just be rolling massive anxiety at the whole thing, to be honest.
Except that it's only a couple of years since they left Egypt with the Egyptians.
Not a couple of years.
No?
One.
It's 1 year.
Okay, it's 1 year.
1 year, and we don't know how to fight, and where are our weapons coming from, and who actually knows what they're doing when it comes to making these armies? Does anybody know that this is actually a really good idea, a good way to do it? This is the things that would be going through my head.
Okay.
Trade in the dolphin skins for the weapons. Right?
From who? For who's wandering around? Who are we buying these weapons from?
Right. The weapons dealers always know how to find you.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm remembering the lesson we learned a few weeks ago in Emor about
ahead.
the fellow who didn't have a place to go and his reaction. And we developed that conversation about how angry he was and how disassociated he was and how he was, he didn't have a place for himself. And if you're, I can imagine that if you're separated from your best friend, you're going to cheat and find ways of getting over there. There's going to be also, people are really going to try to, to break the rules. I think it's a natural thing to do if it's coming down as a brand new edict.
Right.
That's
So
that's felt as unnatural.
Right. So I think from Jen's comments, from your comments, there's going to be some resistance. I think it would be absolutely natural to imagine different kinds of resistance to this. I mean, look, we're always resistant to change. Any kind of change, even when it's really great, it's tricky. We were talking during Schmooze before we were recording, right? About how do we, the changes that are happening now in our way of life and so on, and how this is going to sort of like discombobulate a lot of people. So I'm just approaching it from a different angle, but again, reiterating that the dry text, one of the driest texts that we have in the Torah, actually is this like dry crust over like a seething volcano. There's a tremendous amount of emotional turmoil that is underneath this. To a certain extent, the ordering both causes the turmoil, but also is an effort to try to control the turmoil, right? To try to give people a sense of stability, a sense of, I know my place now. When you don't know your place, it becomes a real source of anxiety. But there's this kind of real social engineering that's going on here. That's being, delivered in a very, very, monotone, quiet, boring way, but which is really revolutionary. Something is very, very different. Something that's happening here is changing everybody's life. Yeah, Sandra.
Well, you've belonged to a tribe, and that because you came out of Egypt with your group and your family.
Well, who says that? Who says you came out with your group?
Well, I don't know. I'm saying it. I think you were in your house. You came out with some of the people you lived with. All right. So now you're organizing, and there's thousands of people. So maybe you're connecting with all the other people that you're related to. So you're part of that group. But then you're part of this larger group. I think it's this huge notion of the Jewish people or the Israelites or the whatever they were called in the moment. And that sense of belonging, again, goes back to your notion of stability, because it's a sense of place. I not only have my small group, then I have my larger group. And then I have this whole nation. So as much as I'm scared, like Jen says, where's the stuff coming from? The arms dealers, that. Wow, we're strong. We have all these people and they're all organized in some way. So I think the more knowledge people know about their place in some way gives them a sense of, it calms them, as well as, what Alan said, if you lose your best friend and he's in another quadrant, then there's a sense of loss. So I'm thinking, as you said, a seething pot of enormous amounts of emotions, because you've lost some friends. How do you get to see them? You don't live near them. And there's thousands of people around you. I'm still stuck with thousands of people in these different tribes. So,
right. The picture is of an enormous population. You know,
Yeah.
the Bible scholars obviously go to town on this and can't, you know, they find it totally preposterous. Somebody once mentioned that if you use these numbers, if you take these numbers literally, leaving Egypt would have taken something like 100 years from the first person to leave until the last person left, you know, because it's just, you know, so many people here. So
And
I would
how
say
did they
that
all get, yeah, how did they
Right.
cross the
but
sea?
but the picture is what it is, and
Yeah.
and when we're meant to take that picture, you know, seriously and use our imaginations to think about it in that way. The image that we get, right, is there's now a temple, a tabernacle, a shrine in the middle. We've got a dislocated, uprooted tribe, a literally uprooted tribe. Levi is now singled out and taken out of the midst of everybody else. They're a special tribe, and they don't live on the north, the south, the east, or the west. They live in the middle, right? And the core is where the tabernacle, the Levites, and then we've got this periphery.
Schmooze. Oh, sorry.
Where does the periphery end?
Oh, God.
Where are the town borders? There aren't any, right? We have a
And
definition.
who guards the borders?
We don't have it. We have a definition of a community that starts at the center,
Right.
and that has people then on each side of the center, but there's no delineation of how far out it goes. There's no delineation of where it stops. And the guardians are not guardians of our external borders. They're guardians of our sacred heart,
Mm.
right? Let's make sure that the core, the holy place, doesn't get intruded upon, doesn't get desecrated, doesn't get contaminated, right? That it's treated by everybody in our community. So it's a self-policing community for itself. And at this point, there's actually no real discussion about let's protect ourselves from marauders. Let's protect ourselves. Who's going to be, you know, taking the night shift to make sure that the Amalekites don't come and
See,
attack?
this is my problem with this whole thing. Clearly, no one here has really any military experience, let alone like military leadership experience.
Right, including God, right? So, I mean, this is all God's orders, right? So this is, you know, God's planning it all out. And what would we have to answer? The answer is, at this point, God would say, I'll take care of the outside. I'll watch you. I've got clouds of glory to encircle you. But who's going to take care of the way you treat each other and you treat this tabernacle that you created? That's where I'm worried, says God. I'm not worried about the outside. I can deal with that. All right, that's what we have for today. And to be continued, right? I want to wish everybody Chag Sameach after the first Shabbat Shalom, of course, and then Chag Sameach as we go forward. Take care.
Same to you.